It's a black midi shirt. I'm not an evangelical Christian, nor am I a Satanist. Thank you, enjoy the video. Hey everyone, Joey here, aka Animus, and the 21st of October 2022 was one of the greatest New Music Fridays I've ever seen in terms of both the quantity and the weight of its new releases. Sound like self-checkout. And I've spent the past week listening to as many new releases as I can, so that I can put together a little quick-fire roundup of all sorts of releases that came out on this day. So, starting off with some obvious heavy hitters, UK rock group Arctic Monkeys released their 7th album, titled The Car. Very inventive, guys. A year or two ago, I went back through the entire Arctic Monkeys discography, which spans a pretty long period of time, and while I found some excellent music along the way, I don't know if I'd quite call myself a big Arctic Monkeys fan overall, as there were also quite a few stretches of music that got a bit repetitive or just didn't really click with me. So 2018's massive left turn into spacey psychedelic lounge music, Tranquility Base Hotel and Casino was a perfect change in my eyes, and that album actually went on to probably become my favourite record of theirs overall, which is a bit of a spicy take, I'm pretty sure. But 4 years later, and their 7th album is a bit of a continuation of those kinds of styles explored on that album, albeit more sparse, minimal, and orchestration heavy. So on paper, this album did look to be pretty up my street, and the first single released from this album, There'd Better Be a Miracle, I thought was a great piece of music with its impeccable production, cinematic feel, and slow burn progression, which really led me to feel like they were doing what they wanted as a band, not just pandering to the expectations of their long-term audience. Then I sat down and listened to this whole 10-track, 37-minute album, and it's fine. It's an intensely okay album. It does start off well with the aforementioned single being put right at the beginning of the album, and then another 2 tracks afterwards which are varied enough to keep me interested and invested. And then it just kind of devolves into a lot of pretty flat and backgroundy music, which is lacking in dynamics and variation in its sonic palette. The whole album is masterfully produced, it's a very expensive sounding listen, and the orchestration always keeps it pleasant on the ears. It's just that this all feels like dressing around something that has a pretty hollow core. As not much of the songwriting really sticks out particularly to me, things don't really go through many different phases or changes in emotional intensity, and Alex Turner's vocal presence is less than thrilling, with some pretty constant meandering crooning. If there's much deeper hidden meaning behind the words on this album, he does make it quite hard for me to care particularly. It's easy to listen to, and it sets a pretty nice atmosphere, but honestly, aside from that couple of tracks that start off the album, there's really nothing that left much of an impact on me on The Car, and it sees the band lacking in vitality, and for that reason, I think I'm feeling about a strong 5 on this one. Do let me know if this worked for you though. The other real biggin from the 21st was the new Taylor Swift album, Midnights. Though they have almost nothing in common with each other musically, I feel like I'll say a similar thing about my feelings on Taylor Swift to my feelings on the Arctic Monkeys. That was probably an aggravating use of the definite article. She's proven that she can really write a tune, and I do admire just how prolific she's been in these last few years, somehow managing to continue the re-recording of numerous albums while also regularly releasing new material, such as the album Folklore and its companion Evermore, which were an interesting and well-executed turn into more of a folk rock sound. But then she does have quite a large amount of work that I'm just pretty neutral on, to be honest. Midnights has an interesting concept, being inspired by 13 Sleepless Nights and taking on a much more contemplative lyrical vibe, accompanied by electronic production that creates a pretty understated nocturnal atmosphere. And in terms of its overall execution, I definitely think this is an album that will very much satisfy long-term Taylor Swift fans. Her main shtick is very much on display here, with quite a lot of heart put into it. But unfortunately, there are many things about Midnights that don't quite work for me. Be it the production, which, though often one of the positives of this album, with some of its Lord-esque minimal atmospheres, often ends up very middle of the road. Some of its frankly strange lyrical choices. Sometimes I feel like everybody is a sexy baby and I'm a monster on a hill. Okay, hun. Or Snow on the Beach's bizarre underuse of Lana Del Rey, who's relegated to just backing vocals, which are hardly intelligible as Lana Del Rey. She may be an expensive person to have on your track, but this is Taylor Swift we're talking about. You can't just promise the fans something that's so exciting to so many of them and then deliver this. This isn't to say that there aren't parts of the album that are enjoyable for me. The track You're On Your Own Kid in particular is without a doubt my favourite track on Midnights. Its coming-of-age lyrical themes, though nothing new for her music, feel heartfelt and work pretty beautifully with the slow burn build of this track. Probably one of my favourite Taylor Swift songs full stop. Karma is also an undeniable bop, and the album is just consistently pretty nice to listen to. It just lacks much that's ear-catching or pops, which you can absolutely do while still creating a low-key atmosphere. And it also just has a general style of songwriting and an aesthetic that's not massively to my taste. So if you are a diehard Taylor Swift fan, I do think this album will work very well for you, but personally, I think I'm feeling a light 5.5 on Midnights. Not much of a favourite. Right, I am kind of tired of giving neutral reviews of albums now. Before I delve into some other genres, though, I would like to just prove to you guys that I am not someone who just dislikes pop music, and for that reason I'd like to talk about this new Carly Rae Jepsen album, The Loneliest Time. Carly Rae Jepsen, as numerous other music critics have said, is an artist who, despite not taking pop music in any massively bold or experimental direction, consistently executes modern pop tropes with a precision and a standard that far exceeds the vast majority of her contemporaries. She is a bit of a bop machine. This new album doesn't often stray too far from her established formulas, but it's like comfort food to me, this album. It just uses tried and true methods to pack pure bubblegum pop punch throughout. Even with a few nice surprises here and there, Western Wind has a gorgeous, soothing atmosphere to it, and some lyrics that are just plain beautiful. Penultimate track, Go Find Yourself or Whatever, excellent title, is a near 5-minute breakup ballad that takes its time and goes through multiple phases to really nice effect, and the album ends on a disco-influenced Carly Rae Jepsen track featuring Rufus Wainwright, which is a thing that happened. I've got some nitpicks here and there. I don't really like the timbre of her vocals on Shooting Star, and the organ harvesting line on Beach House was a little jarring. The album's not gonna knock anyone's socks off either, but it's just yet another well-executed pop effort from Carly, and I'm feeling a 7 out of 10 on The Loneliest Time. Then there's a new one from Bibio, his 10th studio album, which I guess is just titled Bibio 10. Over the course of his career, Stephen Wilkinson has proven himself to be an incredibly versatile artist with a diverse range of talents and ideas, beginning with his own distinct brand of ambient music with lo-fi analog folk aesthetics, and then later proving himself to be a very adept singer-songwriter as well. His 2019 album Ribbons is just jaw-droppingly beautiful and probably one of my favourites of that entire decade. A criminally underrated album that I definitely recommend you check out. But I digress. Never one to settle into a formula, he's yet again moved in another exciting new direction, this time into a kind of funky, polished 80s sound. Lots of retro drum machines, shimmering production, falsetto vocals. Not a direction I was expecting him to move in, but one that in retrospect makes a lot of sense in the context of his career. There's such a broad range of aesthetics on display here, all implemented seamlessly and well executed. From the gorgeous, expansive atmosphere of lead single Off Goes the Light, to hypnotic guitar jams like Charat and Cinnamon Cinematic, Even the fully embraced 80s camp of Potion grew on me. Plus, along with the host of new sounds that Bibio's exploring with this album, there's even a stretch of tracks towards the end that reminds us how strong he is as a folk rock singer-songwriter and how beautifully songs in that style work for him. Ribbons was such a breathtaking album that I think it would be incredibly difficult for him to surpass that in terms of my own personal enjoyment. But I had a great time with Bibio 10, and I'm overall going to give it an 8 out of 10. Next up, there's a new album from Jean-Michel Jarre titled Oxymore. Jean-Michel Jarre is probably one of the most important names in the history of electronic music, with records dating all the way back to the mid-70s, like the absolute classic Oxygène. The guy's now in his 70s, which is why I really admire that he continues to put out some really interesting new projects. This album was described as an homage to the late composer Pierre Henry. I'm not yet familiar with the guy's work myself, but after listening to this album, it seems like something that I should maybe get into, because this album is really, really strange in the best way possible. And I think it's great that this late in his career, he's putting out music that doesn't sound like anything he's made before. There's all these dark, ominous, intense soundscapes with all of this clutter around you that somehow makes sense and fits together. He's been putting out his recent music with binaural headphone mixes, which essentially gives the illusion of a 360-degree space around you where you can place sounds in front or above or below. And along with his last record, Amazonia, this is proven to be more than just a gimmick, changing the way you can place sounds in space for a listening experience with more immersion and clarity. And even if you just see this as a gimmick, it's a really effective one. It really kind of tickles my brain, all of these sounds flying around. Can't quite tell if they're in the music or in the world around you, further adding to this record's retro-futurist aesthetic. So while not every synth sound and musical idea works for me, and there's no one track I'd quite call great on this album, Oxymore is a seriously wacky and interesting listen, which has me really excited for any new music Jean-Michel Jarre puts out in the future, and proves that he's still got a lot of creative juice in him even this far into his career. So I'm feeling a strong 7.5 out of 10 on this one. Then Dry Cleaning have released their second studio album titled Stumpwork. While last year's New Long Leg had its moments, it kind of proved Dry Cleaning to be one of the less interesting bands of the recent British post-punk revival scene, for me personally at least. Florence Shaw's deadpan conversational vocal delivery was somewhat of a novelty, but I didn't find it to be the most diverse, ear-catching, bold, or engaging listen. But luckily I see this new album, Stumpwork, as essentially an improvement on all fronts. It's more dynamic, there's a more broad instrumental palette, greater variety. The band just feels generally more confident on this album than they did on their debut. I definitely enjoyed how far the lyrics tipped into absurdism here. There's some pretty zany ideas here and there that keep it an engaging listen. If their debut sounded fed up with the world, this album sounds like liberatingly giving up on conforming to society's expectations. And yeah, it's nothing mind-blowing, but I definitely do think that this is a pretty significant improvement for the band across the board, and I'd give this album a 7 out of 10. Now get that album cover away from me, I do not like it. Night has fallen, and there'd be no better time to talk about a new release from UK dark ambient and garage artist Burial. With his string of singles and EPs from the 2010s, along with this year's Anti-Dawn EP, Burial has really crafted a new style for himself of these vast, expansive, unsettling nocturnal soundscapes, with a lot of very sparse tracks that run on for 10 plus minutes, feeling like they have multiple different movements and sub-tracks within them, to great effect like 99% of the time. And this new Streetlands EP is pretty much a continuation of the same styles we've heard already, but is in no way a step down in quality. Just 3 lengthy new tracks that absolutely hit the mark once again. This is an excellent release in time for Halloween. It definitely takes that dark ambient route mostly. The title track even contains a repeating sample of There's Something Out There that really does create this unsettling mood to the track. And the majority of the EP is spent switching between between these expansive drones and bits of vinyl crackle and grimy sounds, and there's this constant atmosphere like you're lost somewhere in an empty, unfamiliar city at night. Streetlands is just another example of how consistently well his ideas work, and a welcome addition to the Burial discography that will surely satisfy fans like me. I'm feeling a light 8 out of 10 on this one. Anyway, I hope you have enjoyed this set of reviews. This isn't something I'm thinking of regularly doing like I used to. It was just a good week to spontaneously decide to do this kind of thing. I know this video has ended up running on a lot longer than I expected it to, but I do hope you have enjoyed. Thank you for watching. See you next time.